Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for stopping by the channel. My name is Adam. This is Weekend Watch Repair, and I really appreciate you stopping by. I got to tell you, it feels like an age since I've had a video to publish, for reasons I'll get into later, I guess. But it feels good to be back. I'm glad to be back here with you, and we have a super cool watch on the bench today. This is a Seiko. Can you believe we actually have a Seiko on the channel again? I'm really excited about it. We have a Seiko 6106 8120 from March of 1968. This watch is owned by a very nice gentleman named Ben. He's actually even a Patreon supporter. Thank you, Ben. And I'm just thrilled to have it on the bench. So you can see we're just kind of checking the status of everything. A lot of dirt up in that bracelet. We're going to do some QC tests. Bezel feels okay. We do have an issue with that bezel, which we'll get into here in a minute. I hadn't noticed it yet. We'll notice once we kind of get under higher magnification. This is a 6106A movement, this being a proof model, a very early model of the Seiko Sport Diver. Actually, this watch, I believe it was in the black dial variant, but this watch was actually on the cover of Seiko's product catalog in 1968. So, I mean, this was like their flagship model. These things are super cool. These sport divers are actually kind of often lumped into the same category as the rally divers, which is basically the same watch. The bezel was different. It had kind of a checkered bezel, but unbelievably cool watches from the day. I'd love to have one. I actually have the modern remake that they came out with a few years ago. I think Ben and I were talking about it. Hey, that modern remake, it's a super cool watch. The absolute worst bracelet ever on a watch ever. So that thing, it was on that watch for about 8 seconds by the time I got home. Then I put a leather strap on it. But the watch itself is super cool. So we have an original example here that Ben sent me, and he's been waiting on this for, gosh, I'm ashamed to say how long he's been waiting, but thank you for your patience, Ben. I'm glad to have this thing on the bench. And well, gosh, I don't know if I should, well, I guess I'm recording live. Like, if you can't tell, I do these voiceovers off the cuff. So not a lot of editing, but I haven't made the thumbnail yet. And so maybe I'll put it in the thumbnail, maybe I won't. But this watch has some issues that we will see. And it has a specific issue. It took me a minute to find, and something I have never seen before, ever on YouTube or non-YouTube ever. We found it's a weird issue just because, and we finally caught it because well, I ain't going to ruin the surprise for you, but it's got something interesting in here that can only be caused by a human hand, mind you, and I can only speculate on how, and have no clue who, but how this came to be. It's like, you'll see it. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into this thing. Goodness gracious, man, the rambling is starting early on this video. We're going to begin by disassembling the automatic works, which begins with the rotor. We need to get that off, and we need to get the automatic works off itself, the automatic bridge. What's really cool about these 6106 movements, and that's not unique to this movement, but like if you've seen a lot of my Seiko videos or any of the countless others in YouTube land, you'll notice that you're kind of familiar with how that automatic system works. It's a bridge, a pawl lever, and a transmission wheel. And these are kind of like self-contained, and you have to the lubrication is actually what holds that pawl wheel on that bridge, that pawl lever on that bridge as you install it. And it can, until you kind of learn how to hold your tongue right, sometimes when you're first kind of cutting your chops on the Seiko movements, that pawl lever won't drop into place correctly. These are kind of self-contained. They have a cover plate on the back of it, which kind of holds everything together. So it's really cool. When you pull these bridges off these movements, there's no potential for the transmission wheel to go flying or the pawl wheel to go flying because they're under tension against one another. So really, I like that on these movements. Crown comes out. I like to check the gasket on those. It kind of gives a good indicator of when the last time this watch was thoroughly serviced. That's far from the worst one I've ever seen, but it's definitely due. Movement ring comes out, and now we can go ahead and flip this thing over and get it out of the case. So I like to do a few little love taps on these just to make sure everything's clear, which on this watch, there's a ton of real estate in there. That thing falls right out. And there we have it. Taking a quick look at this dial, you always get it always looks different on your wrist. And then you put it under a macro, or even worse, under a microscope, which we'll do here in a minute, they always look worse the closer you get, but it is clear from here, there are some markings on there. The hands especially show it. So we'll kind of get into that and see what the damage looks like on this thing. Additionally, in this video, Ben had reached out and he wanted to get the hands reloomed on this watch. So we're going to do that. So don't do a whole lot of looming on the channel. So something rarely seen, at least on this channel. So look forward to that, I suppose. I don't know how exciting that'll be, folks, but you can look forward to it. We can get the hands off and carefully store those hands in the same container we put the dial. And normally, if I'm not touching hands, we'll leave those things in the container and untouched throughout the entire process until everything's ready to go back together. But not this time. Okay, under the microscope, let's take a look at this dial. The calendar ring around the day and the date you can see some spots on it, a little bit of oxidation. The dial we've definitely got moisture in this watch. You can see where it's got underneath the varnish on the bottom side of the dial. We have a few marks on the dial over towards the 9. Yeah. Like there's some spots. And really the only thing you can do with these, or the only thing I can do, because I'm not smart enough to think of anything else, is just to, use some Rodico gently. Sometimes I'll rub it. Tapping is a lot safer, especially depending upon the dial. But just see if any of this stuff comes up. I learned a lesson very early on, and I've read it 1,000 times, but until you learn the lesson yourself, I think all of us who get into this hobby are kind of destined to make the same mistake. Is if you see something, you're like, I can fix that, and then you inevitably make it worse. Happens 100% of the time, unless you're a dial restorer. So I've kind of learned eventually, if it doesn't clean up with Rodico or simple, gentle cleaning method, don't take it any further. It is what it is. In order to remove the dial, we have 2 dial feet screws we need to go ahead and loosen. These don't need to be fully removed, but loosen enough so that it gives clearance for the dial feet to be removed. And most of the time when you do that, especially on these Seikos, that thing will just lift off. However, and it's a lot of times with these plastic dial spacer rings, which thankfully on this particular one, I will say, isn't snapped, because those things love to snap if handled even anything other than with a feather touch. They will snap, and even snap, they still work. But that one is not. That's an original one, and it's intact. So that's awesome. We have an 8-4 code on our dial. So if I can bring the case back over and zoom in at them. Thank you. We have 8-3 on the case back, 8-4 on the dial. So that is 1968 is the 8th. The next digit is the month. So we have March and April respectively. So good to go, original dial. That's awesome. All right. So we're going to go ahead and begin disassembly here. If this is, well, that's a weird camera angle. Okay. If this is not your first video on the channel, well, thanks for coming back. But a lot of this won't be new. You'll probably see this before. So I think I owe it to the folks of you, the viewers here. If you're a regular viewer, you know that it's been a while since I've done a video. And I made a post about it. Like, patrons knew, I kind of let them know what was going on. I made a post on the community tab, but I don't know how often people check that. I really have no clue. Real quick, I am going to go ahead and use this opportunity now, since this is a 6106 and does not have manual winding. I'm going to put a full wind in this watch, and we'll take it over to the time grapher and see what this thing looks like before we begin. Okay, so these aren't the greatest numbers in the world, at which you'll see beat error is actually not bad, but we see a radical time shift difference when we move it from dial down to dial up. And then it kind of stabilizes and then goes back up. Amplitude, not great. Honestly, pretty atrocious. Vertical positions. And what's kind of crazy, if you think about this, so the amplitude, we didn't even really see an amplitude drop. It stayed steady, which actually is kind of telling. Normally, on a healthy running watch, which we knew this thing wasn't. It's been a while since it's been serviced, but on a healthy running watch, you'll see a drop in amplitude when your watch is in a vertical position, like crown up, crown down, stuff like that. When it's dial up and dial down, everything is just you know, especially anything with a cap jewel, like your balance and all that, the only contact is on the very, very tip of those pivots on everything. So if you change it to a vertical position, where now it's not contacting the very tips of the pivots, those pivots are rubbing on the side of the pivots on the jewels. So there's multitudes more friction happening. So that's going to create drag, and thus your amplitude goes down. And that's normal. Every watch does that. So, but what's interesting there is we didn't see an amplitude drop when we went to a vertical position. So what that tells us is there's some issues in this watch. Most likely, which we haven't really got into it yet in this one, but most likely it's just because really dirty wheels, dirty jewels, stuff like that. When we don't see that drop, and when it almost is the same, it's sometimes, and it depends on the movement and multiple things, but you will see some drop, maybe 5-10 degrees on an amazing one, maybe 30 degrees, and that's actually okay. This one here, it actually raised compared to some of the vertical or horizontal positions. So yeah, so I'm interesting. But anyways, so I think I owe it to the viewers here to kind of give you a little explanation. Because, well, hey, like 70% of you aren't subscribed, 77% actually at last count. So please subscribe if you haven't. I don't know how else to say it, how to beg and plead, but that would be cool if you would. I sure would appreciate it. But I had an out-of-town work trip. Oh, actually, it was right before that. I had a bonehead moment, absolute bonehead moment, my own fault. And I'll spare you the gory details, but one evening I landed myself in an urgent care clinic getting stitches. I had a really deep gash and getting stitches in my dominant hand index finger. And so that really negated my ability to manipulate tools without, you know, I mean, it stopped my ability to use tools. I couldn't grab anything. I had my finger wrapped up like a mummy. I couldn't even bend it. So it took several weeks before I could get to the point where I could transition to a smaller band. Stitches get removed and it starts to heal, and I transition to a smaller band. And now that the bandage is small enough, I actually have it on underneath my finger cots, and the tip of my finger is 100% numb, and it's still healing, but I can use tools again. So now we're kind of back to doing watches. And additionally, if you have kind of followed, you may have been surprised to see this watch on the channel at all, because I'd mentioned on Patreon, I'd mentioned, I think in the last video, the channel recently hit 25,000 subscribers. Actually, I think it's at 26,000 now. And I had planned on doing a giveaway. It's like my favorite thing to do on the channel. And I thought that's a significant milestone. We should do a giveaway. I have a watch picked out. I teased in the last video, asked for folks for their thoughts. Way more people left comments and made a suggestion on whether the Willard or the mystery watch. And so we made a decision. I'm going to at least try to go with the mystery watch, but I've never once worked on the brand, the movement. I've never even opened up the inside of one of this brand before, or even seen the movement ever. So it'll be a learning experience, but there is a tool or a utility rather that is highly recommended for disassembly and assembly of one particular component of that movement. And I ordered one, and what I got in the mail was not what I ordered. The seller's reputable. It's being resolved. So that's why we're doing this watch, is because I don't have what I need in order to work on the next watch properly. So I am still doing a giveaway, and I hope you'll stay tuned for that. I have teased this thing. I have put myself in a weird spot because I have teased this watch. Hey, it's a unbelievably cool watch, but I just hope I do it justice so I can actually make the thing run, because man, everyone knows where there's a watch coming now, and it's going to be one I've never actually touched. So it's probably not smart for me to broadcast it, because if I screwed it up, no one would ever know, but now everybody on earth knows. So that's weird. Okay. Well, anyways, so yeah, there we go. We will do a giveaway, but yeah, that it had to be put on hold so I can get the right item that I originally ordered. Interesting. This is kind of a first symptom of several. We're taking this out, and you notice the barrel is trying to come out with the bridge. So we'll quickly remedy that so we can pull the bridge off and move on. Fourth wheel comes out. Looks like the little race on our pivot has got a little bit of a mark on it. Gently remove our third wheel and our escape wheel. This very odd piece we're removing now is the hack. So one side interfaces with the sliding clutch, and the other side on the top of your screen, what it does is it moves and it'll make contact with the lip of the edge of the balance wheel and stop the watch. Whoa. That's always one point that's really dirty, but yeah, that could do with being addressed. I'll go ahead and remove our center wheel now. Excuse me, rather. I should have said I remove our cannon pinion, and that is needed before we can remove our center wheel. And I should point out the spring for the quick set function is still on the movement on the dial side. And normally, as part of a normal service, you don't actually need to remove that. And you can clean it with it in there, and everything's totally fine. I always removed them for the sake of just removing every component on the video. But then I thought about it after the fact here, and wow, would you take a look at that? That center wheel decided to come out with the bridge on that one too. Same thing with the barrel. Ooh, that thing's stuck on there. Interesting. Let's take a look at this. I don't know why I'm sounding like I'm surprised. I know what's coming, right? I mean, I worked on the watch and I edited the video, but take a look at that. Whoa. Yeah, that'd be a problem. That may be one reason, one maybe of many, one of one. Who knows at this point, but that will put a huge killer on your amplitude. Moving on, I decided later on, I was like, you know what, let's just go ahead and remove it just for the sake of removing it. So this spring you can actually leave into service, but on this aim movement, and I had forgotten, it's a good thing I decided to, because although this spring normally, on any number of these 61 series, you can leave it on these early A series movements, the quick set arm that interacts with is normally kind of I say riveted, but it's permanently attached to the main plate. On these early A's, they're not. So good thing I did that. Next up, we can disassemble our automatic works. So there's 2 screws that hold this on, and those are close to the size, but not exactly the same size as the screws that actually hold the bridge down. But easy way to change those if you have all of them together in a parts bin is those 2 screws for that cover plate do not have a polished head, while the 3 that are visible from the outside do have a polished head. And take a look at that rotor bearing. Goodness gracious. There's actually a little bit of a spot on the top pivot of that transmission wheel, and there's some spots on that pawl lever. Wow. Transmission wheel can come out. Oh, that one's stuck too. Oh yeah. I don't know how well the camera's picking that up, but that had some gunk on it. And I couldn't wait for pre-cleaning. I wanted to see what this was, and thankfully, take a look at this. It's coming right up. So my best guess is that's early onset corrosion from, I would assume, recent moisture ingress. I don't think that could have been there all that long. However, it's just clear there is a little bit on the inside races of the bearing. So that thing's going to get an ultrasonic as part of the pre-cleaning process. And then there's some markings here as well. I'm just seeing what else coming up. In actuality, I'll tell you, the cleaning of the small rust spots on the pawl lever itself, way more stubborn than that. Moving on, our mainspring barrel, we can go ahead and disassemble this. This orientation right here is actually upside down compared to how it sits in the watch. If I can get my tweezers in there, I'll get my tweezers on top of the spring and on the bottom side of that, so I can kind of pinch it down while I work the lid off, that we can make sure that spring doesn't come flying out. Ben had mentioned, early on, and I've talked about it in a few videos, but I like to reuse the original mainspring when we can. So that was one of the things he told me on this video. He's like, I'd like to reuse the original mainspring if we can. So I was kind of curious at this point just to see what this thing looked like when we got it out. The mainspring gets removed by grabbing the inner coil of the mainspring, kind of while holding the rest of it in with the meat on the tip of my fingers, and then just getting a few coils out, and then we can work it out. Barrel does not look to be in too bad a shape, so that's nice to see. I'm just double checking the flatness of the mainspring, and actually, it's pretty darn good. I mean, there's a tiny little raise, but like there is nothing significantly wrong visually with this mainspring. So I think we can go ahead and clean that up and reuse that. Went ahead and remounted the balance because it would have been easier had I removed this jewel prior to removing the balance. But here we go. One thing I noticed is that regulating arm is, gosh, that's really close to that stud holder. I mean, normally when these things are set, there's much more distance between those. But anyways, let's go ahead and we'll turn this, and that little arm can be a bit stubborn, but we turn that ever so gently to give clearance to the hairspring so it can be removed. And there we go. Come on, Adam. Now, I'm taking a look at this movement before we start the pre-cleaning process just to check these jewels, and it looks like that escape wheel jewel looks plugged, actually. The third wheel jewel has a ton of crud in it, as does the center wheel jewel. We flip this movement over, and there we can see kind of what this looks like from the other side, because, so we did have some pretty stuck pivots in this thing. Sorry, bumped the camera there. Now we'll go ahead and clean some pivots. So what this is a extra fine grit silicone polishing stick. Eve Flex is the name brand. These are a generic. It's the exact same stuff though. But take a look at that lower pivot for the third wheel. It's got some corrosion on it. And if you remember seeing the jewel for the lower pivot we saw previously had a bunch of gunk in there. So we're trying to do a cleanup on this thing. Get in a little closer and go for one more round of these silicone polishing pads. And like I said, I use these. I mean, they're this is not super aggressive. It's not like putting it on a jacket lathe and burnishing or really polishing a pivot. This is really just cleaning it up. So it's not going to remove scratches or move any material, but it's just a nice, safe way to clean up pivots. Here's our escape wheel. Flip that over to the other side. And that one had a little bit of gunk in there as well. And here we can see that center wheel. And I'm trying something here, and it's a bit awkward. But I can see that corrosion, is coming off. Like I said, it couldn't have been there for too terribly long. But after just a brief time of trying it this way, I got quickly frustrated. Although it is effective and, we are being gentle, I thought there had to be a better way of doing this. So I kind of had a light bulb moment. And so what I did was mount the stud for the center wheel in a pin vise. And I'm just ever so gently trying to, I have my E-Flex mounted in a rotary tool, which is, I waited way too long to get a good one of those. It's like a Dremel. This particular one is kind of a better quality than a Dremel, but in the end, I'm glad I spent the money on it because it was not inexpensive, but a really nice tool to have. This is the first time attempting this, and what I quickly learned is I need to put the E-Flex deeper into the tool so there's less flex in it, but the principle is sound. So we clean that up and take a look at that. That actually worked really, really well. I'm super pleased with that. Super pleased with that. And I put it back on the bench block just to make sure the wheel's flat. Moving on, taking a look at the status of our jewels on our pallet fork. No chips or anything. They are a bit dirty, but otherwise in good shape. Our pivots could use a little bit of work, so we'll put some E-flex on those like we had previously as well. But in order to get the junk off the pallet fork, what I like to do is just very, very, very gently, like zero pressure, like as Bob Ross used to say, two hairs and some air. And I'm just using a bit of Rodico just to kind of just pick up all the stuff that I can off the face of the jewel. And that makes it, we'll clean this thoroughly in one dip later, but it provides a quicker end result when you can take the bulk of that junk off that way. Close inspection shows that the upper pivot for our balance wheel also has a lot of junk on there, and we'll see the results of what that did to the jewel here in a bit. The barrel arbor kind of had the same issues that our center wheel did, and so although not onset rust, but there was some light oxidation, and this side is actually in a lot better shape than the other side. So I mounted the E-flex a bit deeper in the rotary tool, but I also learned a lesson here. Don't put a whole lot of pressure on it, because when I did, it kind of would get away from me for a brief moment, and we'll see that here shortly. But on this side, that actually cleaned up quite nicely. Let's take a look at this. Just need to clean up the excess off here. And yeah, that's a superb result. Very, very pleased with that. Doing the other side of that, which is the lower part of the barrel arbor port, was in a lot worse shape. And here I started to get a little bit of confidence in doing it, and I applied a bit more pressure. And when I did, that would happen. It doesn't hurt anything except my pride. But first time really attempting this. But that just does a superb job cleaning up all that oxidation and anything on there. I kind of wish I thought of it sooner. And surely I am definitely not the first person to ever think of that. I just never really read about someone doing that, but it sure does work well. There we go. And if you want, we can see the difference like a before and after. There is a significant difference, and that what just that quick little work did. So very pleased with that. I also want to make sure that that there's no gunk inside the screw hole in the barrel arbor, but the top port where the barrel lid sits and everything else, those bearing surfaces are good to go. Reassembled the barrel without a mainspring, and I'm just checking the side shake on the barrel, and that's really, really good right there. That is excellent. Seen a lot of these Seikos where that would wear heavily, but that's in great shape. So moving on, we're going to do a barrel arbor jewel upgrade. So we need to remount the main plate. And so the jewels that we're going to put in here are 1.6 millimeters in diameter, and they're friction fit. So what I'm going to do is ream this out in stages. I begin with, I didn't film all of them. I really like to do this process up close, and it's hard. I'm more comfortable doing it when I'm not filming because I'm up real close to it. But I'll do a couple here and just kind of show you the reaming process. We started with 1.19. That's a 1.29 reamer, and we'll move all the way up till we get to 1.59. And that 1/100th of a millimeter is the friction that's needed that will hold that jewel in. So now we'll go ahead and deburr and just put a little chamfer on each side of this movement. That helps the jewel kind of drop into place, because you could theoretically press this in from either direction. I like pressing them in from the inside, from the barrel side of the movement. But there we go. And then off camera, I'll do my best to kind of clean it up a bit more and just make sure I don't have any metal shavings inside that hole before we press the jewel in. So we'll just kind of get it sitting on top there and press it down just a hair, just basically enough so the jewel doesn't move as I transfer it over to this jeweling tool. If I remember right, yep. That's what happens when you don't secure the when you're not holding the bottom of it steady as I'm turning the knob on top. But there we go. We'll press that down into place. And I'm trying to, my goal initially is just to press it down where the top of that jewel is level, is flush with the top of the main plate. The other jewel that goes in the bridge, we don't need to ream anything, but we do need to push out the old bushing that's in there. And the replacement jewel is the same size as that bushing, and that is also friction fit, but we don't need to resize the hole or even chamfer it for that matter. So we'll go ahead and drop that jewel in. And those jewels, there is the way it's kind of made, there is a slight oil sink in there. So I'm making sure that oil sink is going to face the outside of the movement. And we'll press that down into place as well, getting it flush with the underside of that bridge. And that's generally a good starting point for in shake. So on this particular one, I did make one slight adjustment to the jewel in the bridge to push it upwards just a hair. But there's our in shake, and that's looking really good. So moving on through pre-cleaning. What we have here is a glass jar of naphtha, and I got the main plate in there, the barrel arbor, and a few parts. And I'll just use a brush, and this cleans up any of the baked on stuff, loosens up a bunch of stuff, and really does a great job of cleaning this. I mean, almost to a point where visually they look good enough to kind of go back into the watch. But this does a few things. It prolongs the life of the very expensive cleaning machine fluids, and also just make sure that it gets most of the work done so that the cleaning machine is really working on the fine detail stuff. And so that's really good. All the bridge plates, most of the parts, obviously I'm not putting wheels in there or a balance or a pallet fork, but also do that same process with the main spring, the automatic rotor, just you name it, just any of the major components where it's safe to do that. Okay, so getting the last of these parts loaded in the baskets. And I'm just trying to group similar parts together so it's easy to sort them after they come out of the machine. There we go. The last of these things go in. We can go ahead and put the lid on and move everything over to our cleaning machine. So this cleaning machine, I am fortunate to have because I mean this thing new. This is the cheapest manual version of this Elma, and it's still a few $1,000s new. I did not pay that for it. I bought mine used, but but it's got one wash cycle, 3 rinse cycles, and a drying cycle. And I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you, heartfelt thank you to the patron members who support this channel. It means the world to me that you're over there. I get some great messages from you. I really like the community we've built over there, and it's growing. And thank you so much. So while that's cleaning, I'd take a look at the watch case. And one thing I noticed when we got up close is that it's not sitting down flush all the way. Like if you look at the right side of that bezel, there's a significant gap between that and the case. And then closer here, we can see this retention spring actually poking out. And this is actually not the first time I've seen this, especially on this watch case. It's something, the way this particular bezel attaches, it's easy. And see there, you can see the end of the spring poking out. It's a symptom of improper installation. And so it's, if that spring gets misshapen and then the bezel is reinstalled, it's very easy for that spring to slip out of a little groove that's machined. There's a groove machined inside the case and on the inside of that bezel where that spring should rest and provide the tension that you feel and actually keep the bezel held down in place. But it can be a little bit tricky to install, especially if that spring is misshapen. And you can see when we pop the bezel off, the spring just kind of popped out. And just going from experience, I can tell you that spring there is very stretched out. The tips on that should come much closer together. And so I'm going to have to reshape that bezel spring before we reinstall it. Taking a look at this bezel, the loom pip on this thing is in phenomenal shape, and I don't want to take a chance on damaging that through an ultrasonic, so we're going to clean that manually by hand. But unlike on some other watches, this particular one here is not secure. The crystal is not secured by the bezel, So there is another metal ring that is holding down the crystal itself. So we'll pop that off as well. And yeah, I'm not sure how that lighting is going to pick that up, but there is like a light coating of gunk over everything in here. Oop. Well, the crystal came out easy, a lot easier than it should have. And the reason is because our crystal gasket here is hard as a rock. So this is predating those Viton style gaskets the Seiko use. That's a normal gasket. And yeah, that thing, let's see if we can get up a little bit closer if memory serves. Did I do that? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, getting in a little bit closer, and you can see there's zero give to that. This is 100%, not maybe the only cause, but moisture was 100% getting into this watch through the crystal, through the lack of a good seal with this crystal gasket. So we need to go ahead and get this thing removed, and it was buried in there, right? It took a little bit of digging to get that out. But yeah, this, I kind of flex it. Yep, there we go. Yeah, that crystal's gone, or that crystal gasket's just totally gone. If it wasn't before I broke it, it is now that we snapped it. But yeah, you can see what that thing looks like when it gets worn out. And that's where a lot of that moisture and all this gunk that's inside this thing that actually doesn't look too terrible on camera, but that's where it's coming from. So our inner chapter ring and the seat for that gasket can come out. So the inside of that part there is actually brought to a polish, and that's what you see when you look at your watch. That's that rehot between the dial and the case. Taking a look at the case itself, this is just what moisture and all that will do. So that's going to be a whole lot of fun cleaning that up. And I'm lying, that's not going to be fun at all, but it needs to be cleaned up. And so I won't bore you with the details, but let's just say it took me forever. You can see just how much scrubbing it takes just to break this stuff loose. It took a while to really work through this, just to kind of get all this stuff cleaned up where we could clean it properly. Doing the same thing to the inside of the bezel, but with that loom pip there, I'm not going to scrub over that. We'll clean that very gently separately, but let's see what our ultrasonic plays for us today. Oh man, our ultrasonic came out with some heat. It had been a while since I've got to use it, so it came out swinging. So I've already kind of cleaned up the gunk off these two jewels, but I just kind of wanted to show you that for size comparison so you can see just how tiny those things are and maybe justify a little bit of my camera shake when I'm working on these tiny components because they are so small. But there we go. You can see this jewel here. This is the lower balance jewel. And it takes me a few attempts with my tiniest oiler here, but I'm dropping some 90-10 on there until I get the amount of oil that I'm looking for, which that looks pretty darn good. And now we can go ahead and pop our chaton into place. Flip this thing over, and here we can see our ring of oil right in the center of that. And that's what we're looking for. So the upper jewel, if you remember, the balance had some stuff on the tip of the pivot, and you can see the result of that on the dead center of that jewel. So as we kind of scrub this a little bit, and I'm going to rotate it around so I'm kind of hitting all areas of that jewel. We'll use a little bit of Rodico just to kind of clean it up. But you may already be able to see it. We'll kind of get a better view here momentarily. But I noticed something right in the center of that jewel. If you look dead center in that jewel, you'll see a little dimple. And what that is just the pivot in combination with the dirt and dried up oil and whatever has kind of created a grinding paste and worn out the center of that jewel. So we have a factory replacement Seiko jewel, and you can see no dimple. So This has already gone through the cleaning process, and we can go ahead and apply 90-10 on that as well. Try to get a larger size oil, a bit of oil on the oiler. There we go. That's what we're looking for. All right. We'll flip this over and just verify that our oil ring is intact and I didn't smear it, which can happen. But there we go. That's looking really good. So after we cleaned up the balance and I cleaned the pivots on that as described, as kind of we shown with the wheels earlier as well. And then we cleaned that thoroughly using some one dip. I didn't run that through the machine. I have run these through the machines. A lot of people do, and they leave them attached to the balance. I generally, I don't always do it, but I generally like to clean these separately in one dip, but it's not fully necessary. But I think you get more access to the pivots if you disassemble it from the balance bridge, and I just like doing it that way. We'll go ahead and drop our upper jewel in and see if this spring is going to fight me or not. I honestly don't remember if it did or didn't, so we'll find out together as I'm ad-libbing this voiceover. There we go. That wasn't too bad. So the bottom jewel got the exact same treatment, and now we still need to tighten up the hairspring stud. So now that the jewels are in, we can go ahead and level our hairspring, and we'll do that by adjusting the height of this hairspring stud. That's actually pretty close, but yeah. And I'll tell you, folks, I mean, I need to sit down and just do some reading and learn more about microscope cameras, because my view through the eyepiece of the microscope is much brighter and much clearer than the camera really reflects. But we get that back in, and I'm just checking to see this just to make sure that the hairspring is not deforming as I'm moving the regulating pins that's sitting in between them, and not moving that hairspring along with it. So that actually looked pretty good. We're applying some braking grease to the inner walls of the mainspring barrel, and then I'll just kind of thin that out and spread it out very thin along the inside of the barrel wall. We've got the mainspring wound back up, and we can go ahead and install this. And I lubricated that mainspring with a very, very light coat of Mobius 8200, which is why you see it kind of stick there. That's just the new lubrication, and it wasn't even that much. Our barrel arbor can go back in. I'm just making sure that hook gets inset into the eyelet on the inner coil of that mainspring. And we'll lubricate the barrel itself, where it's going to interact with the lid with a bit of HP 1300, just as we did for the lower part before we put our arbor in. Our lid goes back on, and now we can go ahead and snap this down. And I know you folks like the clicks and all that. I actually even muted my television that I have playing in the background just so I could record the click, but you don't always get a nice click, and this is a little teeny tiny baby click that the microphone on the camera really didn't even pick up. So it really wasn't worth putting in. So sorry to deprive you of the click, but I tried. HP 1300 lubricates the lower part of this wheel, and we can go ahead and get that set into place. There it goes. It drops down, and we can lubricate the top pivot before we put our bridge on. I just find it easier to oil that way. There we go. Dropping our barrel down upside down at first so we can lubricate this bottom pivot. And again, when you see that red lubrication, that's going to be HP 1300 on this movement. They also make that lubrication clear, and I still have some of that. But then later on, I bought it again because, and here we're going to install our hack lever. But they put a dye in, a coloring dye, just so it's easier to see how much you apply and where it goes, just to make sure you're oiling properly. So I like using the red for that purpose. It also, there's a flip side of that. You can see when I screw up too. But There we go. Escape wheel went in. Dropping our third wheel in, just making darn sure that we get that lower pivot in place. And when we do it, there we go. See how it sits flat like that. 90-10 is clear. And we're going to put that on the race of that lower pivot, and we can drop that fourth wheel into place. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and put some HP 1300 on the upper barrel arbor port before we put our bridge on. You can oil this after too, but it's a lot more convenient to do it now. I make less of a mess when I do it in that order. There we go. Our bridge drops down. It actually seemed to go on pretty nice. Sometimes I'll fight with those to get them oriented correctly, but there we go. And I'm just going to keep this all in one shot. We'll do a little tapping trick and just kind of try to vibrate all those pivots into their jewels. And I'm just grabbing some tools here so I can test the wheel train just to make sure everything found its home. Come on, Adam. This isn't weird at all. Ooh, that bridge moved. It doesn't work. Blasphemy. And it's always the escape wheel. You know, it's like, it's always the escape wheel. It can also be the escape wheel and the third wheel a lot of times, but that escape wheel is always the culprit. But there we go. Now we're running. So, hey, that's the first time in a while we've done the tapping trick where it didn't work. So, but rules are rules, and I have to show you everything. So there you go. We did get it. I tested it again once we got the screws down but not tightened. Everything still ran, so we'll go ahead and give them a tighten as well. This is our click spring. That's going to interact with the ratchet wheel to keep it from moving backwards, thus unwinding the watch. So that's an important part. Make sure that square cutout is aligned properly with the arbor. And just holding that ratchet wheel down, we'll just go ahead and give that screw a snug. Next up is our pallet fork. This is always one of the challenges. And so getting that lower pivot in place whilst orienting it between the teeth on the escape wheel so it's not binding up. And we can drop our bridge into place. And always kind of reminding myself when I'm doing this, this is among the most delicate work in the assembly of a watch, is putting this in, because it's so easy to break one of these pivots. So just making sure that all those pivots find their home before we even put a screw in. There we go, all tightened up. And now I'm just going to put 4 or 5 turns in this thing, apply a little bit of power, and we'll just check the action on this pallet fork. It's locking and unlocking good. Never really much of an issue with locking depth on these Seikos. It is something I look at, but we really don't need to address it in this watch. It's really not much of an issue on these. It's been a long time since I've even had to do it, and I haven't, honestly, I'm a hobbyist. I mean, it's not even something I've done that often, and boy, was that a learning experience when I was doing one on a pocket watch. Days of locking depth and banking pin adjustments and all that, and boy, I hope I don't have to do that often, because, man, what a nightmare that was. We are applying some escapement lubrication to the exit stone of this pallet fork, and you can see there, we'll apply this 3 times, each time getting it on 5 teeth of the escape wheel. You know, Alex Hamilton did a video recently, and he showed different methods of applying escapement lubrication. One of them I found intriguing, and I'm going to attempt to try it one of these days. I've always found this method. He showed other options I had never considered. We'll just put it that way. It's a really interesting video. You should probably go watch it. So if you're kind of into this hobby, it's he makes very technical videos, about people who are, geared towards people who are learning the craft. And it's just what a resource that guy's channel is. It's just so awesome of him to do it. I believe, although I've not taken them, I believe he offers courses too, which is, I think, great. I took Mark Lovick's courses when I started, and those are fantastic also. Our balance is in. One thing I was just making sure of is that before I put the balance in, I made sure that hacking lever and all that was oriented in the outward position, so our hack did not interfere with the balance as we installed it. So down to some wheel train lubrication. There is our third wheel, and here's our fourth wheel, and our escape wheel. And these are pivots on the rear side of the movement. Now we flip over to the dial side. Sorry for the glare. There's our escape wheel and our third wheel. And we've already lubricated our fourth wheel and our center wheel and our mainspring barrel. So we're good there. All right, folks. So here is the initial time graph of results after running for just a couple minutes. I got beat error and a rate basically set, but these are the results I got. And I'm not honestly terribly pleased with it. Now, amplitude is lower than I want to see, theoretically within spec. And if I let this thing run for a week, it would get higher, but technically we're within spec. But what's really bugging me is the timekeeping difference between position, even though it's not bad. It's not bad, but it's not great either. And I mean, we're actually even within Seiko spec, but I just didn't like it. And I didn't like the amplitude. I should be seeing more. Not a lot more, but more. Here's what we found. Everything came back down. There was some additional corrosion on the other side of the center wheel that I just could not get off. And additionally, when we zoom in real close, we got some damage to this collet on the center wheel, or on that center post where it's going to sit in the jewel. I didn't like that one bit. Not one bit. And you got to have super crazy magnification to see that. So this center wheel's going in the dustbin of history, and we're going to replace it. Here it is, folks. So here is what I found. I've never, ever seen this before. I can only guess that someone in their wisdom decided they need to adjust the regulating pins to create more space for the hairspring. And I don't know how they accomplished this, but look at what they did to this regulator. I have never seen this. And these regulators on these Seikos by design, there's not a lot of room for adjustment, but that is just horrible. That'll cause rate differences between positions 100%. I don't know how in the world somebody thought that was a good idea. But here's the results after the fact. I also went ahead and replaced the mainspring with a new one of the exact same strength, just to see if that would make a difference. We gained 15, 20 degrees of amplitude immediately. This is after a reclean and reassembly in the exact same method we just filmed prior. But really what I'm liking is, see how our rate is super consistent between positions now? And this is what I want to see. This is going to make this thing a much better timekeeper. And so this is, again, maybe an hour after I got the thing running again. And these results are much better. Original strength mainspring windings. So, I mean, they're going to run in the lower range. But starting out at 200, this thing, and I just shipped the watch back to Ben the other day, but it ran for a while, and that will begin to increase as the watch wears in. So it was running high teens into the 220s, and at some point, even on a full wind, it'll reach 230. And that's the butter zone. 220s, it's all day long, every day. These things will just run for eons. So super pleased with that. I think our amplitude issue, I honestly don't think it was much of a mainspring, although, it's nice to have a new mainspring in it. And so, I shared this info with Ben, and he's like, yeah, go ahead and leave that new mainspring in. Although originally, if the original one was reusable, and I think it was, we got a new one in there now, but it's the exact same strength, same everything. Theoretically, this thing will have a slightly longer power reserve because the original mainspring was 420 millimeters long. The new one is 430 millimeters long. The length of the mainspring, is factoring in the power reserve. The thickness of the mainspring is what provides your power. So this has the same thickness as the original mainspring. So the power it's going to exert is the same. So that's why even with this new mainspring, the amplitude is going to run just like the old one. I also have that other method. It's a different mainspring, some other upgrades. When we want to bump this up into like the Swiss watch level territory of amplitude, it does make even for steadier timekeeping and all that. But Ben wanted to kind of keep this thing OEM, so that's why we went with the original mainspring. OEM with the exception of obvious barrel arbor upgrade, which is needed on these. That's OEM ideally would have done that. And like this watch here, um, and real quick on these keyless works, I like to apply a lot of extra grease on here, just for the initial movement, and I'll clean that up. But like this watch here, this 6106A is a 25 jewel movement. And you can actually see, I'll throw a few arrows up here real quick. These jewels, these are kind of extra jewels in here. Those particular ones I threw the arrow at are part of it ups the jewel count, and from a marketing standpoint, that hey, more jewels. But like what those do is provide the track for the date ring, and so those are raised ever so slightly above the main plate, and the date ring actually rides on those. A lot of watch companies do that. Rolex does that, for crying out loud. But it is technically a functional jewel. I mean, they put 4 of them in there on this particular movement. The main points of this watch are jeweled like they would be for a 17 jewel movement, but they've got a few extra jewels in here in a few spots. I wish they would have put that higher jewel count and put them on the mainspring barrel, but you wouldn't have me and the other people on YouTube, and surely a lot of people off YouTube, and you wouldn't have the industry that exists today of people making jewels for these old Seiko movements, because there's millions and millions of them out there, and people love them. And guess what? If they want to keep wearing them, you really need to do a jewel upgrade on these things. Moving on to finish up our keyless works, I'm applying some grease to the stem in a few spots that will here on those flats for the sliding clutch, where the setting lever is going to engage in the little flat where it's going to go into the main plate, and on the very tip. And we can go ahead and get our stem into place. There we go. This here is the quick set lever that big heavy spring engages with. And normally these are permanently attached to the main plate on later revisions of these 61 series movements, but on this early A model, it is not. So we're going to go ahead and apply some grease to the contact points of that. And what we need to do when we put this in is make sure that arm on the right hand side gets past and sits on the opposite side of that setting lever. Kind of tuck this up in there. There we go. Now we can put on our spring. And so as we kind of continue doing this, I wasn't planned, but I guess I'll do it. I already name dropped Alex Hamilton. I've never actually met Alex, by the way. I'm a huge fan of his channel. I was watching Mike at My Retro Watches. He did a video. Mike, he didn't tell me he was going to do it. He name dropped his channel on a recent video, and he didn't tell me he was doing it. Caught me by surprise. Because I was just watching his video. I'm like, Mike mentioned my channel. So only fair. I'm going to name drop Mike's channel. That guy's got I'll say this. So me and Mike are on opposite sides of the planet. Odds are I'll never get to meet the man in person, although I wish I could. But we've spoken several times. I'm a patron member of for his channel, like a full-blown paying Patreon member. I love his channel, and his was an inspiration of mine. Now he's been doing this, Mike's one of the originals, maybe the original first one, I don't know, but Mike's been doing the whole watch YouTube thing for a long time, and it was just like me. He was a hobbyist learning the craft and basically documenting it through his videos, and was definitely an inspiration. I came across him before I ever really decided to take the plunge. I saw Mike's videos, and I'm like, man, that guy's doing it. I want to learn this. And I learned a lot through Mike. Actually, before my very first ever chronograph, which was a Seiko chronograph, before I ever did the channel, I watched Mike's video and how he did it. And so I've been fortunate enough to speak with him on multiple occasions. And I will say this, Mike may be, I don't know, he may be the nicest human being on the planet. Maybe that's a British thing. He's just the most polite, nice, kind person ever. And there's a big time difference between us. He's ahead of me by 6 or 7 hours. And the other day we were talking, and I realized, I'm like, Mike, isn't it like midnight where you're at? He's like, yeah. And because I was just rambling. So uh Mike, it's a real pleasure to speak with you, and maybe one day I haven't traveled internationally in a long time, but if you ever make your way to the States, dinner's on me. But I just wanted to randomly and for no other reason name drop Mike's channel, My Retro Watches, and he's got a website where he sells watches that he works on and some t-shirts. I've got 3 of his t-shirts, time-tees.com, if memory serves. If I didn't get that right, Mike, I apologize profusely, but you should check him out for no other reason than he has an awesome channel and he's a very nice person. So there we go. I've paid Mike back for um, the non pre-notified channel call out on YouTube. All right, so we're getting this movement put back together. Our date ring can go into place, and again, it's sitting on those jewels, which I guess theoretically is less friction, although they're totally not necessary. Trying to set this date jumper spring in place. There we go. Second time's a charm. And when you do that, sometimes it'll raise up. So just making sure that that's held down properly. There we go. And see, we have a few more jewels on this cover plate. You can see it about the 12 and the 6 o'clock positions in that shot. And those are serving the same purpose, only for the day wheel. And those are raised slightly above that. So as that sits on the plate, it's not sitting flat on against all that steel. It's just sitting on those jewels. So there's less contact area. I flipped that up there. It was just a visual check, just to make sure that plate's sitting flat. It's not raised up in one location. The quick set works, and you can see we put a little bit of 9010 on the jumper spring and on the actual actuating lever that actually does the action of turning that date ring in the quick set menu. All that's working good. So a little bit more 9010 on the jumper spring that is integrated into that cover plate, and that's going to be the jumper spring for the day wheel. And I made a bit of a mess there, so I'm just going to attempt to clean that up a tiny bit. We can put our day wheel on. So in order to set that day wheel in place, we need to pull that spring back and get it inset between 2 teeth on that star gear on the underside of the wheel. But there we go. And the clip goes down, making sure that the round side goes down and the flat side is up. It will lock into place in either orientation, but you're kind of basically doing a favor for the next person to service this watch down the road, getting the round side down. So you can see we have an arrow showing there. Our crown's a 4 o'clock crown, so the dates line up at their 3 o'clock position. But I'm checking the semi quick set. So if we rotate it backwards, there's Monday. It goes back to Monday, and then rotating it forwards, it'll set it to Tuesday. And so if you go backwards about to 10 p.m. and then go backwards to 2 a.m. again and going back and forth, you can quick set it's called a semi quick set. Checking the hack just to make sure that that's working properly, and it is. So moving on to the hands, because right now we're waiting on the crystal gasket to show up. So I've got a little bit of time to kill. I wanted to show you the status of these hands before we start working on them, and I didn't even know how it was going to turn out before we started. But we need to get this old loom out. And so I have my pegwood sharpened to a very fine tip, and I'm trying to be very gentle. And the other side is just kind of comes to a point like a knife's edge, the way I shape that. And I'm just going to start working and trying to get that old loom out of there. And I just use an old oiler to kind of get the loom that's kicked up along the sides. Working through that, and a little bit of gentle scrubbing with pegwood on the top side here, just to see if there's anything here that wants to come off. But trying to get this as perfectly clean as I can before I actually put these, because these are steel hands. So I'm going to put these through an ultrasonic. I'm going to want to get everything out. The minute hand is much, much worse, but it's also more delicate. So I'm trying to be extremely careful as I remove this loom, because you can bend those hands, because that steel between the loom on the through the length of that hand is super thin. But thankfully, a lot of that junk's coming off that hand. And so this is actually the full process. I couldn't really think of a natural cut point on this, so I just sped up. I just left the whole clip in here and just sped up the footage. But scrubbing this, trying to get that old loom out and just clean up the hand. And again, everything looks worse the closer you get on your wrist. Boy, these hands look phenomenal on this watch. Now, the back side actually cleans up better than the front side, for crying out loud. You think Ben would mind if I just mounted this minute hand upside down? Because, I mean, look at that. There's like almost not a mark on that. There we go. Removing the loom on this seconds hand. I'm just going to kind of get in there and twist my pegwood around. That actually comes out without too much fuss. And I can see there is like some hazing or whatever on the sand. I didn't know how it was really going to clean up, so just a little bit of it comes off, not everything, but again, I'm not going to get too aggressive with it. So we need to put some loom compound together. So we have our luminous compound itself, which I'm trying to get some in there, but I always make way too much of this stuff. You only need a little bit, but come on, get out of there. And that's honestly what, oh goodness, that's way too much. That's 10 watches worth right there. But we need to get I always start with a 1-to-1 mixture of this luminous compound. And then this is the varnish. So I'll start to work this out. And I dump it in there separately from the loom, because as soon as those start to interact, they will start to set. And within 4 or 5 minutes, it's becoming hard and too hard to work with. So we are on the clock right now on this. So I get the amount of varnish in here that we want, and then we'll start mixing this. We need to mix this very, very thoroughly and kind of get a paste. But also, Ben wanted to see, like, can we match the loom? Because the loom on the dial under microscope is one thing, but it actually doesn't look bad. So this here's a little bit of dye for loom to make it look aged. I've got the tiniest amount on a little toothpick, tiny amount. And I just want to darken this ever so slightly. And I don't know, I mean, if that's even going to be enough to do anything, but Ben had said, like, if we can't match it, let's get closer. I said, well, can we just go, I asked him, I said, would you rather keep the original loom or have pure white if given the option? He said pure white. So, but it took me too long to put this together, so it started to harden up on me. So I'm going to put a little bit of thinner in there to kind of make it workable again. And I'm looking for a consistency of like, I don't know, like pancake batter, maybe is a good reference, but enough where I can kind of work with it. So here we go. What we want to do is have capillary action kind of allow that loom to span the distance of this hour hand. There we go. And that's that ain't bad. All right. The longer the gap, the more material, it takes multiple attempts to kind of get it there. And as this thing sets, just minute by minute, second by second, it becomes harder to work with. So this isn't something you can take your time, but only to an extent. But just kind of slowly working this, getting a bit more until I can finally span the gap of that minute hand. And I'm going to put kind of one more coat. And when this stuff dries, it actually thins out a little bit. So it won't sit as high off the hand when it's done. Admittedly, I put a bit too much loom on here when I did this seconds hand. And so it got kind of over the edges a little bit. And I immediately saw that and it drove me nuts. So what you'll see here is just me I'm going to remove a bit of the excess and then just nitpick this thing and make sure that not get any of it removed off the side of the hand. What's really cool, since I did this hand last, is like it's starting to solidify, so it's actually really easy to remove tiny little bits and pieces of it. But I just kind of work my way around it until all of it's on the underside of the hand. There's nothing on the sides or anything. And set that and allow that to dry. And usually want to give that at least 24 hours. Moving on. And so I will say a little bit of time has passed. A few additional days have passed. But now we got the rest of our case parts in, or our crystal gasket, which we were waiting on. But now that that's in, I'm going to go ahead and move forward. So we got our dial spacer ring on. We got our dial on. And now we can tighten our 2 dial feet screws. By this time, the loom has set on these hands, and you can see it's actually looking really nice. I could have done with a bit more dye, clearly, because it almost looks perfectly white, but it is darker than pure white. But kind of a judgment call, and you really kind of, but we're going with it because it looks good. So, I explained about it. I was like, oh, there's no way I'm going to be able to match that perfectly. But round 2, if I was to do this again, I could have done a bit more dye. Not much, though. Because that aged dye, it doesn't take a lot to make a big difference. There we go. We start this out. Hack clearly works. I'm making sure that everything clears. The underside of the hands, there's room for days. There's no clearance issues, with loom or anything else. So that's looking really good. Cannon pinion tension feels excellent as well. So very pleased. Moving on with our case. Everything got cleaned up. You can see this thing looks light years better than it did when we first started. I did apply a thin coat of silicone grease to this crystal gasket. Now we can we have a new replacement crystal in. So the challenge with these is to get these in, but get it on the inside lip of that L-shaped crystal gasket without that gasket kind of folding on itself. And that's what that grease helps to accomplish. Just to make sure we get a good seal on that gasket, doesn't deform when we're putting that in. But I finally worked that around and checked that gasket ring around the outside edge to make sure that it's good all the way around. We can put our ring on and go ahead and secure this crystal in place. There we go. I reshaped, and so you can see how much closer it just briefly shows you, but the tips on that spring were much closer. We reshaped that, and that it holds tighter around the edge and sits harder inside that groove. So you can see that groove machined into the case here. So we put more tension back into that spring. It's going to grab it tighter, which is what we want, because that's where it's kind of popping out and becoming loose. But it's sitting in that ring all the way around, and there's a corresponding ring on the bezel. So when we do this, we start the bezel off on the center of that spring, and then just as we press it in, we just check each side just to make sure it's there. You can kind of feel it go in, and it doesn't take, you almost don't need a press. You can hear it click into place. But I'm going to go ahead and put it on the press and just give it a little love tap for good measure, just to make sure that everything's good to go. There we go. But tension on the bezel feels good. So very happy moving forward. And I just wanted to do one more double check of this before we put it in the case. Date change works good. Here we can see how the quick set, semi-quick set for the day works. You can see when we go backwards, it says Tuesday. It bumps, it says Tuesday again, then goes to Wednesday. That's all working exactly like it should. Quick set for the date works excellent. So we can go ahead and move forward and put this thing back in. Press it down far enough where that dial finally meets that inner bezel. And there we go. Movement ring can get dropped into place. We have a fresh gasket with some silicone grease applied to it on our crown, so we can get that put into place. And you can feel that nice, good seal on that when we put that in. That's really good. And now we can move on to our automatic works. So we'll begin here with some HP 1300 on the center post, making darn sure that we're not getting it on the top of that post because that's going to sit, uh, and that's in its travel. That thing doesn't sit dead center. That it by design it sits off center to allow the movement, proper movement of that pawl. But any movement, lubrication on the top of that post could theoretically, because it's razor thin next to that fourth wheel jewel, and we don't want that to interact. So just making sure that lubrication is only on the side. Transmission wheel got all cleaned up. Pivot looks good. That gets put into place, and our cover plate can go back on. And again, if you got 5 screws in your bin for this assembly, the 2 screws that do not have a polished head are the ones that belong to this cover plate. And it's always very helpful because we can't do it once we're installed. We'll go ahead and put a bit of HP 1300 on the bottom pivot of that transmission wheel. There we go. With that nice little contained unit, these install much easier than like the 6138 or 39 or several other models of 61 series. Drops into place, and we're just going to rotate that bearing and make sure the interaction between the pawl and the transmission wheel and the ratchet wheel is all good. All the gears are meshing together properly. And we could put our screws into place. And Seiko really did a beautiful job. They put that that chamfer around the different levels of the edge of that bridge. It looks really gorgeous, all cleaned up. A tiny bit of HP 1300 goes on the upper pivot for that transmission wheel. And we're going to apply some lubrication to this center wheel bearing. I lubricate every other ball. Doesn't take long. In a few turns, that'll work its way around. And then a bit of HP 1300 on the sides of this transmission wheel. That's just going to lubricate where it's going to interact with that pawl lever. It's actually really easy to do this too when you put that wheel on before you install it. Off camera, I seem to do it more in that order. I don't know why I do it this way on videos. Who knows? But either way works as long as it gets there, and we can go ahead and work that around, making sure that that ratchet wheel and everything's turning in one direction regardless of the direction we turn our bushing or our bearing. You can also see that movement was moving around a bit in the case, and that's okay actually. When the case back is down and there's when the case back gets screwed in with the proper gasket and the proper thickness gasket, it's going to sit against that movement ring, and it's going to lock everything into place. So the little bit of movement in there without the case back on these is totally fine. It's by design, so no issue there. Rotor's down and secure. We have negligible in shake or side shake rather on our rotor bearing, so that's good. It feels nice and smooth. That watch definitely has a full wind. And when you see that rotor kind of stop and bounce back and forth when it stops, there's a full wind in that watch right now, and that's what they move like when they have a full wind. Getting this gasket in, there's a little ridge inset into this where the gasket's going to sit kind of inset into the case back a little bit. I'm making sure that it's flat all the way around, and we do have some silicone grease on there. Now we can put our case back on. I'm going to clean up the little marks that I left with the Rodico. But there we go. This watch is really starting to come together. Man, I like that. So using some plastic just to make sure I don't introduce any new scratches into this case back. All regulation has obviously been done at this point. I don't tighten it down to this full extent, until regulation is complete. There we go. And you can really kind of feel it, and you can feel that gasket as it's compressing that gasket as you do it. It's nice and tight, but not super, super duper tight, like it's proper. We can get our bracelet put back into place. If I remember right, and because I think I have to fill the void here with something, but I think this one here, the spring bar fought me a little bit going back in. And I don't really hide anything from you folks. So if I struggle with something, I'll leave it in the video because it's real life. Come on. Okay, I got it. This one here was actually pretty easy. All right. Boy, take a look at that watch. Isn't that a gorgeous watch? I mean, you get just wearing distance from, man, that thing looks so nice. I'm double checking the bezel on here. As you can see, we are flush all the way down. That spring is inset proper. So everything's mounted up good. We don't have the same issues we had before. And there it is, folks. Our finished watch all put back together, running beautifully. I'm super pleased with how this thing turned out. It's such a beautiful watch. Thank you to Ben for being patient with me. Ben, I wanted to give you a little shot here. I have this, the only thing I ever bought on Etsy is this little watch holder, man. But what a cool watch, man. And thank you so, so much. Folks, I have some serious shout outs I need to give to the new patron members of the channel. Pete, Travis, Sherry, Percy, Andy, Carl, Leonardo, Ian, Ernst, Janosch, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Greg, Kotani, Gabriel, Robert, Alex, Kevin, Lou, Tony, and David. Wow. Thank you guys so, so much. Thank you folks for watching. I'm humbled by your support, and thank you so, so much. Folks, if you like the video, please like and subscribe. I really would appreciate it. It helps the YouTube gods promote let this, the channel reach a wider audience. And thank you so, so much. If you're an Instagram kind of person, you can see what I'm working on over there as well. Feel free to take a look. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your patience between videos. I'm glad to be back working again on watches, and hope to dive into that giveaway watch real soon. So stay tuned. Till then, folks, take care of yourselves and take care of each other, and we'll see you soon.